Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm excited for you to be here with us. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kimberly O'Neil. I am the founder of Pod Studio. We are a professional development and technical assistance company for nonprofit startups. Tonight, we are closing out the year with an amazing webinar, one that I know that our community needs tremendously, and it's about insurance basics for nonprofits. And I'm excited to welcome Julie Bernard, External Relations Director from the Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, to lead this conversation for us this evening. Before we get started and I introduce Julie, I read Julie's bio, if you can, in the chat, we want to be honest. If you already have nonprofit insurance, we want to make sure we know who's in here so that Julie also knows what additional information she can provide over the course of her presentation. If you already have nonprofit insurance, can you drop that in the chat? If you do not have nonprofit insurance, drop that in the chat for us as well. And if you're not sure, if you don't think you have adequate coverage, let us know that as well. So as you come in, thank you for sharing that. As you come in, please let us know, again, if you have nonprofit insurance, if you don't have nonprofit insurance, or if you're not even sure if you have the right amount of coverage for your nonprofit organization. We want this to be a fulfilling conversation for those of you who do not have nonprofit insurance or have questions. Please engage. I'll be monitoring the chat during our session tonight, so please engage with us. If you have any questions, drop them in the feature that says Q&A so that Julie and I can look at your questions throughout the evening and when she answers them later on towards the end of her presentation. But again, welcome everybody. And let me start off by introducing who I believe is going to be my new friend in the nonprofit space. Julie Bernard is the External Relationships Director for Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, also known as NIA. NIA is a group of 501c3 nonprofit organizations that provide a stable source of reasonably priced liability insurance coverages to more than 25,000 other nonprofits in 32 states and the District of Columbia. For over 20 years, Julie has worked with nonprofits to educate and empower them in navigating the nonprofit insurance marketplace. She has also built a nationwide network of broker relationships that are equally invested in supporting the nonprofit sector. Julie is passionate about the partnership collaborations that she has developed and is always looking for new outreach opportunities to share information that will benefit nonprofits. She received her master's in social work in 2009 and is a licensed insurance broker. Julie is also the webinar manager for Blue Avocado, a free online magazine offering practical and provocative food for thought for nonprofits, which is published by NIA. Julie, I'm so excited for you to be here. I talk about nonprofit insurance so much that I think it's just great to have another voice provide some information for our community. So I'm going to get out the way, go off camera, go on mute, and I am going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Really, that was a wonderful introduction. And we work with nonprofits every day to help them navigate what they need to know when it comes to purchasing insurance for their organizations. And that's really what we're going to cover today. I really want you to feel like this presentation is for you. I am happy for you to ask questions throughout. I can stop and address them as we go. I don't want to be talking about something that doesn't make any sense. So please let me know if I'm saying something that is confusing to you. We can stop and review that. That's no problem. This presentation is absolutely for you. Looking at the webinar chat, it looks like most of you do not have insurance. I just kind of wanted to have a baseline of where we're starting at today. This is the agenda of topics we're going to cover. And again, as we go along, if you want to ask me something, please don't hesitate. I'm really here for you. So, insurance for nonprofits. You know, as an individual, if you want to get coverage for maybe your home or your auto, what do? You go online and you get quotes, or maybe you call up your agent at State Farm or Allstate or Farmers, any of those carriers that you're already familiar with. You call them, they can help you get that coverage you're looking for. But it's so much different when you're purchasing insurance for your nonprofit. And so that's the first part of what we're going to cover today. Most nonprofit organizations actually need to work through a broker to obtain their coverage. And so this diagram, I think it's a nice overview of how the process works. And as you can see, everything really starts with that broker. All of the insurance companies that I mentioned before, State Farm, Allstate, Farmers, they're all direct writers. So what that means is that they specialize in helping consumers obtain things like homeowners insurance, renters, auto, motorcycle, those types of coverages. So when you call a State Farm agent, they're going to provide you with quotes for a State Farm policy. They're direct writers. But insurance for nonprofit, it's a different niche of the marketplace. And it's not something that those types of companies specialize in. There's actually carriers out there who specialize in just writing insurance for nonprofit organizations. And the way you can access that market of carriers is by using an independent agent or broker. They are going to work directly with you because that is who their client is. They are working for you. You want to work with a broker who specializes in working with nonprofits because they're going to have the ability to shop a nonprofit organization's coverage to all the different markets that they have access to. They're the ones who can help you get the policy your organization needs. And I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions on this slide. Okay, none so far. So there's what I've encountered in this industry is that there's a lot of confusion and resistance about working with a broker. I think brokers do have a bad name. They get a bad rap. A lot of times nonprofits ask, well, why can't I just get a policy from me directly? And they don't understand that working with a broker is actually to their benefit. So think about it. If a nonprofit came to me for coverage, obviously I'm just going to sell them a policy for my company, and they're not going to have any other choices. When you're working through a broker, you really have a nonprofit professional who's working for you. They don't work for the insurance companies. They are going to talk to you about your organization. They're going to find out where you have risk, what you need help with, and then they're going to be able to go out and get you quotes from different carriers. So you actually have options. And that's really important, especially for nonprofits. You need to keep in mind, brokers, they get paid by whatever carrier you ultimately decide to purchase your insurance policy from. So as the nonprofit, you're only responsible to pay for the premium of the insurance coverage that you purchase. So again, it's that carrier that you purchase a coverage from, they pay the broker a commission to service that account for you, that whole policy term. And that's really important to know. Listed on this page, I just have some basic criteria that I think it's important when you're considering an insurance carrier and an insurance broker. So let's move on to coverage overview. And this was a fun slide to put together because there's generally three buckets of situations that drive nonprofits to get coverage in the first place. So the first one I see a lot is statutory obligations. insurance. If you have paid employees, you got to have workers' comp. And if you have autos that your nonprofit owns, auto insurance is required. That amount of coverage, it varies by state. What I also see drives a lot of nonprofits to secure insurance coverage are those contractual requirements. So it's very common for a nonprofit to be awarded a grant, usually some kind of program development support. And the grant will have several stipulations in it, including one for insurance. So in order for you to get that grant, you have to get an insurance policy in place according to what the grant is dictating. They usually tell you what type of coverage and what limits you should have. Also, a lot of nonprofits raise funds throughout the year. They have fundraisers and events. Maybe you're planning an event at a hall and the venue asks you to provide a certificate of insurance. They want to verify that you have coverage in place. So I get a lot of those calls too. Nonprofits contacting me. They want to rent a venue. They're asking for a certificate of insurance. They don't have any coverage. They've never had it before. So those are some really big reasons why the insurance becomes part of the conversation. Also, you know, I work with a lot of nonprofits, and sometimes they ask people to sit on their board, and the people will say, do you have a directors and officers policy in place? And that is another one that it's interesting to see. Sometimes people won't sit on your board of directors if you don't have a directors and officers policy. They don't understand, or actually the board member they're asking to sit knows that their all of their um, all of their funds and all of their money and everything they own could actually be liable if there was a claim and there's no directors and officers coverage in place. So that's just something else really good to keep in mind. So this is a list of coverages that most nonprofits consider, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with them. We just got a great comment in the chat about someone who left the board because the nonprofit refused to get directors and officers coverage, and that's absolutely right. Unfortunately, some people don't realize the liability associated with just sitting on a board. That was one of the biggest hurdles I had to get over working for a nonprofit insurance company. It's a hard line to understand how people consume nonprofits, but unfortunately, that's the state of the nation today. So general liability, that's the core coverage that most nonprofits obtain, because that's what's going to provide you with protection for the nonprofit itself, for your volunteers, and any events or activities that you have during the year. I mentioned workers' comp a few moments ago. Again, that's a must-have for organizations with paid employees. Directors and officers, that's another popular coverage that many nonprofits purchase, and that's to protect their board of directors. And from there, it really just depends on your organization and what its operations are. Again, that's really where the broker comes in. When you're working with a broker, they are going to come to understand everything that your organization does, and they can advise you as to what coverages you want to consider and why, as well as appropriate limits. And then they can go out in the market and get you quotes for what you're looking for. So, the thing about nonprofits is if you've seen one nonprofit, you've seen one nonprofit. Every nonprofit is completely different. So I wanted to say something about completing applications. For those of you, if you don't have insurance and you've never filled out a general liability application, sometimes it's just a good idea to have an idea about why the application looks the way it does. In general, they can be around 10 pages. The good news is if your organization is pretty basic and doesn't have a lot of different arms doing a lot of different things, there's not going to be a lot for you to complete. Usually the first couple pages are you'll fill out, and after that it goes into sections of different risk factors. And so if you're not working with animals, or you're not working with youth, or you're not working with certain things, those are whole sections that you can just write NA about. So I know I talk to a lot of nonprofits who they get referred to a broker. The broker talks to them about where their risks are, provides them with an application to complete, and they're really turned off when they see the application. And I get that. It's a lot of questions. But because nonprofits don't fit into really any box, every nonprofit has its own box. There's a lot of questions that the insurance companies want to know so they can get comfortable with the risks. They know exactly what they're insuring. So sometimes it's just helpful to think about it as a lot of pages of questions that you're going to have to read, but not a lot you're going to have to answer. I hope that makes sense. And so marketplace trends, oh my goodness, we are in a hard insurance market right now. It started with the pandemic, and I'm telling you, I keep waiting for it to turn, and it has not turned yet. So the insurance market, like everything else, it's cyclical. It goes up, it goes down. Well, right now is very hard, and we're still not seeing any relief in sight. And what's driving those market conditions? Well, there's a lot of things. There's increased public awareness. I'm sure you guys have all seen in the headlines, improper sexual abuse claims filed against large nonprofits. There's also been significant statute reform the past few years, and that's opening up the possibility of new lawsuits for abuses that occurred decades ago. Social inflation that also has to do with just the increasing cost of insurance claims because society, the trends and perceptions about litigation and legal decisions like nuclear verdicts, those have all been really adding to the hard market. For those of you who don't know, nuclear verdicts are judgments in excess of $10 million, and they are becoming more and more commonplace. We often see plaintiffs' attorneys, they look to see what the policy limits are, and that's what they go for. So, nonprofits, big nonprofits that have big limits on their policies. It's sometimes it puts a dartboard on their head. It's not a good thing. So let me read this. We got a question. This is great from Tony. An organization that works with youth and recently secured a contract with the city department. The Office of Risk Mitigation requested we have a couple of policies to include abuse and molestation. So can you help me understand what section that falls under? So that's a great question. So improper sexual conduct is a standalone policy. So a lot of carriers are not just going to sell you an improper sexual conduct policy. They're going to want you to have a general liability policy too, which makes sense because the general liability is what's protecting the nonprofit itself. Improper sexual conduct coverage is for if you have any situations that are one-on-one with any kind of vulnerable population. So that could be children, the elderly, those with disability. So that is probably why they're asking you to get that coverage. So what you're likely going to be looking for is a general liability policy and also an improper sexual conduct policy. Sometimes it's called SAM. It's a sexual abuse and molestation policy. If you're just looking for the standalone abuse and molestation in this market, it's going to be very hard to find. Your broker might be able to help you find that coverage, but my guess is what I've seen lately is it's going to be with an excess lines carrier, someone like Lloyd's of London, which is fine, but it's going to cost quite a bit of money. So, yeah, and that's because of the state of the market that we're in right now. It's what we're seeing is really this limited capacity in this hard market. We're seeing carriers who are just dumping entire classes of business because they're not profitable, so they have stopped writing them. They have dropped certain lines of coverage, so not a lot of carriers are actually offering abuse and molestation anymore. It's horrible because at the end of the day, the nonprofits are the ones that really suffer. When we're seeing this hard market, it's making the rates go up, and it's making the carriers really tighten their appetite and just demand higher premiums because there's no one else in the market willing to offer these coverages. So this is a great question. Will the insurance broker provide recommendations on risk management, such as when background checks are necessary, paperwork that needs? That's a great question. So some brokers are savvy with risk management, some are not. One of the things you should look for when you're looking for a broker is, do they write a lot of nonprofits? Do they offer those types of risk management services to their insured? You can ask that. That's something you need to know up front. Also, if you're placing your coverage with a carrier, what kind of risk management services do they offer? I mean, if you're going to pay a premium to get insurance coverage, you should see what else comes with it. You shouldn't just be paying a premium and not getting anything else with it. So that's something that the broker can look into for you as well. I know a lot of carriers that provide discounts on background checks. They have form libraries. So, when you're looking for a hold harmless agreement or a volunteer waiver, you shouldn't have to remake the wheel every time you need a form. That information should be out there and available to you. So that's something else I would check in with your broker. So yeah, I wish I had better news about the hard market right now, but it's just a really tough market, and we just don't see anything changing right now. The biggest impact we've seen has been on child serving organizations, those that offer foster and adoption services, because they do need this specialized and proper sexual conduct coverage. Also, animal rescue organizations, especially dogs, have been especially hard hit because the claims have been really, really bad, and because so many carriers have decided to stop writing animal risk, it's become very difficult for them to get coverage. So we're hoping things turn around in the next few years. We haven't seen anything like this in 30 years. So it's bad. But there's definitely steps that you can take to position your organization in a really good place for getting coverage. I mean, obviously you can outsource. There's lots of resources like brokers available to help you through the process. As a 501c3 nonprofit ourselves, one of the services we provide is we talk to nonprofits and we answer their questions about the insurance buying process, because it is so different than going to get an auto policy for your new car. It's just different. We'll talk to people. We don't have the same kind of profit motivation. I don't have quotas I need to fill. They're happy to have me talking to clients. Adrian just asked, is there underwriting required for the most common types of nonprofit coverage? Yeah. So anytime you're going to get any coverage for your organization, a broker is going to they're going to provide you with applications to complete. So there's going to be an application for general liability. There's going to be an application for directors and officers, an application for every different type. And each application is going to ask a different set of questions. And once you fill that out, the broker is going to submit it to a carrier, and it's going to end up on an underwriter's desk. And the underwriter is going to take a look at everything that you're doing, and they're going to start underwriting the account and trying to determine what an appropriate premium is for your organization. So again, like the way we do underwriting, we don't have boxes that we can just put nonprofits in, because we really want to underwrite to what your specific risk is, so you're paying the appropriate amount of premium for what you do, not just because you fall into a certain class or type of nonprofit. So that's a great question. We offer free referrals to brokers. The brokers that we use, they actually specialize in working with nonprofits. And there is a difference to working with a broker who writes or works with other nonprofits. I regularly get calls from nonprofits who they start a nonprofit, and then they call their farmer's agent to get coverage, and then they do a Google search online. And sometimes by the time they get to us, they're a little beat up in the process, because it is a very specific niche of people who handle this. And sometimes it's a little confusing to figure out who to talk to, who can really help you. We're trying to make it easier for you so that you feel more comfortable and educated in the insurance purchasing experience. You might also be familiar with other nonprofits. Maybe you could talk to them. Hey, where are you getting your coverage from? Talk to them about what their experience is like, or who's a broker that they work with. That's a great way to get a referral from someone and see what their experience has been. Timing is also, this is such a tough aspect for some organizations, and they're just not prepared for it. This is a hard one for me, because these are the organizations that call us on Friday afternoons, and they need coverage for an event that weekend. And usually it's not their fault. Usually they just found out that they need a certificate of insurance. So the tough thing about getting an annual policy for your organization is that it takes a while. It can take up to 5 to 7 days just in the underwriting process. And that's because there's a lot that goes through with the underwriting. And like I said, we're not just insuring an auto. Cars, the manufacturers know exactly how much each part it takes to replace, and they have it down to a science. Nonprofits, there is no science to working with nonprofits. So you really need to keep in mind that there is going to be some time involved in getting that coverage. If you just need quick and dirty event insurance, yeah, I've got referrals for that all day. You could actually get an online event policy within, I don't know, 30 minutes, less than that. You can get it online, you can print it out, you can have the coverage for events, and you'll be set. But if you're looking for that annual policy, up front, there is some work that you need to put into it. It does take a while, but once you get that policy, I know it's kind of easy from there. We make our renewal process very easy. We do all of our new business, for the most part, it goes on automatic renewal for the next 7 years. So what that means is that every year when your policy comes up for renewal, we just send you renewal apps. It's an outline of your coverage, and you can just take a look at it and let us know, okay, this needs to be changed. Oh, we don't do this event anymore. Maybe you have a different address. You just let us know what needs to be updated on the policy, and it'll just keep renewing for the next 7 years. So that's something good to keep in mind. But otherwise, going online to get a quote like you do for your car, that's just not how it works for nonprofits. Just nonprofits are too unique, and they each have their own individual set of risks. Trying to think of what else I was going to say about timing. That's one of the most frustrating things I get from nonprofits who contact me and they need it right away. 2 to 4 weeks for completion. I think that is fair. Tony just put something great in the chat about how long it takes. Yeah, because when you think about it, the process is, you start working with a broker. You're gonna have to have a conversation with the broker about who you are, what your organization does. They're going to give you applications to complete. You're probably going to fill out the applications the best that you can. And then likely you might need to call the broker and say, I don't understand. What is this question on page 3 asking? The more complete the application is that you send back to us, the quicker we can get that quote to you. The underwriters are asking the questions for a reason. I know they can seem a little tedious sometimes, but so if you get that complete application to the underwriter and they have, let's say 5 working days, that's still at least a couple weeks into it. And then, maybe the other thing that takes time is sometimes when you get that quote, you have to take it to the board, and the board has to approve it before you can actually bind the coverage. So that's something else to keep in mind. Getting a quote doesn't cost you anything. And sometimes I encourage nonprofits. Sometimes nonprofits don't have the money for it, and they're not even sure where to get started. And I think getting a quote can be very helpful because it can give you an idea of if your organization can even afford it. And if not, maybe to think of some kind of programming or fundraising that you can do to earn that extra money so that you can afford it. The organization that I work for, our general liability policies, they start at $550 a year, and that's for $1 million in coverage. And some nonprofits I talk to, they do not have that kind of money. Some think, okay, well, we can actually afford that. All of our policies start at $1 million in coverage. I know some people think that's a lot these days. That's just standard. Is the $550 what you're going to pay for the policy? I have no idea. The only way to know is to fill out that long application, make sure underwriting knows everything that your organization does, and send it in, have your broker send it in and get you that quote. That is how you're going to actually know what the price is. And again, it's no obligation. You can take a look at it. You can see what is offered to you. You can take it back to your board, talk about, do you have the funds for it? Should we raise funds for it? What the next steps are. in that. And I just think it's a really great idea to go through the process and get an idea. Also, it's, see how it is working with a broker and, how helpful they are and are they meeting your needs. They're insurance professionals and they're absolutely there to help you. And we want to make sure that you get situated with the right one. So we can help you if you're working with a broker that you don't feel that is really meeting your needs. They should go over the quotes and the applications with you so that you understand what types of coverages the policy is going to offer and what risks it's going to help you have coverage for. That's part of the services they should provide. And that's really the end of my presentation. I think we got through it a little bit quicker than I thought. I'd love to answer any other questions that people have, anything relating to insurance, what their experience is. Why is it this way? Why do I have to do this?
This is Kimberly. I'm gonna just jump in for a minute. While we have Julie, I think it is important that if you have any question about your nonprofit and what you do, especially linking back to the slides that showed, what are some of those considerations for what types of insurance you're going to need. I think we have an expert that's here with us that can walk us through that. And we have a small enough group that if you have those more specific questions, don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions of what you need, you don't need. Share what it is that you do, and what you've been doing, because I think that allows you to have a different kind of conversation and get questions answered. We always don't always get this type of opportunity. So, to the best of your ability, I would ask, while we still have her for a number of minutes, ask as much as you can about your organizations and your needs, to see what kind of, just some information or tips you can get. And I will go back off camera because there is a question in the chat from Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. So bare minimum for a nonprofit. General liability, I mean, that's really the core. If you're doing anything, if you have people volunteering on your behalf, if they could hurt themselves, they could be lifting boxes for you and hurt themselves. Events, people who just want to sue the nonprofit directly, that general liability is absolutely key. And then for your board, we actually offer a couple different directors and officers policies. We created one several years ago for smaller nonprofits. They don't have any paid employees. So it doesn't have employment practices liability because you don't need it. You don't have any paid employees. And that's a flat fee of $600 a year. So I would say general liability and directors and officers, those would be the two that you would want to consider first and foremost. Get a quote for that, see if you can afford it. Tony has a question. Our nonprofit only has 2 paid employees at this time with several outsourced facilitators. Is it necessary to have workers' comp? With paid employees, it is. And I would encourage you to contact your workers' comp carrier, see if they can shop it to get you any other quotes or rates. It could be really, it's pretty expensive right now. So I would definitely encourage you to be proactive about that. See if they can shop it anywhere. And where can a nonprofit get guidance on offering health, life, or other forms of insurance? Is it recommended to have for full-time employees? So it's funny, a lot of nonprofits don't have the capacity to provide health or life or other types of insurance, because honestly, all the funds are going towards their mission, which I totally get. If you are in the position to offer those types of coverages, it's nice because it definitely helps with employee retention. There are organizations that provide help with getting those coverages. I know one of them, I don't know if any of you are familiar. Well, it depends on what state you're located in. A lot of states have a nonprofit state association. And what that is, it's a membership group for your state. And when you join it, you can access resources and you can access different benefits for your organization. But a lot of times you can go on their websites and they have referrals on there for different organizations that they support. And so you could go on your nonprofit state association's website and see what they offer as far as help goes, and you could get a good referral there. I hope that was helpful with that. Can you share a little bit for organizations that rely heavily on volunteers? Yeah, you know, working with volunteers, it can be very beneficial, but you need to do it correctly. There is a lot of information out there working with volunteers. I know on our website, we have a downloadable PDF booklet that has different checklists on it for working with volunteers. I would be happy to send Kimberly the link to that afterwards so that all of you guys could have a copy of it. There's just lots of considerations to take when you're working with volunteers. You want to make sure, safety obviously is first. Are they driving on behalf of your organization? I mean, that's a big one. Do you have non-owned and hired coverage to protect your organization if, God forbid, their insurance premium didn't get paid for some reason? Are your volunteers in any kind of one-on-one situation with any of your clients? There's a lot of training and consideration that goes with volunteers, so I'd be happy to send that link to Kimberly afterwards. And here's a great question. Where do we start to secure insurance? So it all starts with a broker. And if you don't have a broker, you don't know where to start, we offer free referrals through our website. Like I said, we put you in touch with a broker. It's someone who has worked with nonprofits before. They could get you a quote with us, or maybe they will determine that there's another company out there that's a better fit for what your organization does. In any case, you're going to be taken care of. I can go ahead and put that in the chat. And what about organizations that use independent contractors? Again, there could be, depending on your insurance policy, you'd want to make sure that your policy is broad enough that it covers independent contractors and not just employees. So that's something you want to consider, but that's part of the conversation you're going to have with the broker. They're going to know that you work with a lot of independent contractors, and they should read the policy language to make sure that those individuals are covered under whatever policy you get, the general liability and or the directors and officers. Most good policies will cover them, but like I said before, it's State Farm and Allstate and Farmers. Those are great organizations. What they do very, very well. They do not specialize in helping nonprofits. So sometimes what we see is nonprofits they'll get a really good deal on a general liability policy for their organization, and everything is great until they have a claim. And then they realize that all of the things are not covered. Like the policy language will not include independent contractors. It won't include volunteers. It those policies were not created for nonprofits. So that's why it's so important to be working with a broker who specializes in working with nonprofits, and that they have access to a marketplace of carriers that also specialize in working with nonprofits, because you're really looking for that broad policy language that's going to cover your organization for what it does. That's the worst scenario, is finding out that your policy is, I mean, yeah, it was a good deal and you could afford it, but if you have a claim and it doesn't cover anything, that's a really heartbreaking situation. Any other questions? These are good ones. Oh, can you speak a little bit about cybersecurity issues? Yeah. So it's interesting. We write some really tough classes of business and we do it very well. Cyber is something that is changing on a day-to-day basis. So, like for our general liability policy, it has basic cyber coverage. And for a lot of small nonprofits, that's fine. If you're a big nonprofit, we definitely recommend that you go out, or your broker goes out into the marketplace and gets you quotes with a company that specializes in cyber coverage. Because if you're a big organization and you have that exposure, you want to be working with a carrier that has a forensics team who can get in there and start working on the claims if one comes up. You want that someone who has the experience and the background for handling that, because it is such an ever-changing marketplace. We do what we do very well, but yeah, we do not specialize in cyber. You absolutely want to look for a carrier that specializes in cyber. It is such a niche market. You want someone who does that very well. You don't want to go to anything else. That's a great question. Thank you for that. And nonprofits have a lot of cybercrime committed against them, which is surprising. That's something else I wasn't aware of. Donor databases are just as lucrative as anything else for these cyber criminals. So a lot of nonprofits think it can't happen to them, and it absolutely can. There's a lot of free resources out on the web about cybersecurity as well. I know for Blue Avocado, we've done a couple different cyber webinars. We've done a general one on cybersecurity, and we did one earlier this year on cyber incidents. And so those webinars were recorded. You could go there anytime to access that information. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. Any other questions?
Julie, I have a quick question. As it relates to what we're seeing, I know you talked about rates and just what the climate looks like, but is there anything around the insurance industry outside of rates that you notice may have changed post-pandemic, or things that organizations from this risk perspective need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, it was interesting. Before the pandemic, it was a really soft market, and we would see carriers basically buy business. They would find out how much one carrier was quoting them for a policy, and they would undercut them and buy the business because it was the market for that. And nonprofits had no matter what the nonprofit did, they did not have trouble getting coverage and getting coverage at a really, really good price. And since the pandemic, that has completely changed. And now it's so unfortunate that there's so many less carriers willing to write nonprofits. That capacity is absolutely dwindled, and it's made it really difficult for nonprofits to get coverage. They don't understand. I talk to nonprofits all the time who get non-renewed, and they've never had a claim. And it's hard to have that conversation and help them understand how something like that could happen. I mean, how could a carrier just drop an entire class of business? That doesn't even seem possible. But there's just the insurance industry has been getting really, I mean, the all the catastrophic weather events that we've been having, that has not been helped. The wildfires, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, all of that contributes to it. And it's not just us, it's, nonprofits, or excuse me, insurance carriers have to purchase reinsurance from reinsurers. And our reinsurers, sometimes they don't want to reinsure us for what we're writing coverage for, or they tell us you can't write coverage for this. So sometimes we're beholden to what's happening, above us, and there's nothing we can do about it. Are there better medical benefits specific for nonprofits? The health and medical field is such a mess. We have been asked for so many years, if can't you start a nonprofit insurance company that provides health and benefits? And honestly, we've looked into, we just couldn't figure out a way to do it that made any sense. That whole system is just, yeah, it's a defense. It's a mess. We see a lot of nonprofits, yeah, pooling together, so that they have more of a head count and they can get a better price reduction. That's something to consider. Some nonprofits, they end up going the fiscal sponsor route. So they, align themselves with someone who acts as their fiscal sponsor, and all the behind the scenes, like the healthcare, can be run through the other organization, and that helps cut down on their costs, or
We
collaborations
have,
with other nonprofits. Yeah.
I would add, we actually, that's one of our ultimate goals
Mm-hmm.
is to be able to pull from the medical insurance perspective. But for
Mm-hmm.
those that are on the call, one of the things, I don't know if the state of Maryland still does it. So if you're on the call and your organization is based in Maryland, this could help you. But I'm sharing this so that the rest of you can check with your state. At one time, the state of Maryland would allow small businesses and nonprofits to tap into their existing group policy. You'd have to pay the full rate plus the 3% administrative fee that they would charge for Cobra. But when you have access to their rates for a myriad of different insurance policies, it actually ends up becoming more cost effective for smaller businesses and nonprofits in general. So our recommendation is that just check with your states to see if that is something that is offered, and just look into that, because that was a really great offer that helped a number of people that we knew, but you had to be based in Maryland for that to happen. So other places might already allow you to tap into their existing policies as well.
The fiscal sponsorship route is also another really good way to go. Just sometimes you don't need to pay all those overhead costs. It's nice to share it with something else. And they would also cover your general liability coverage too. Usually that's how it works. So you'd be listed on their policy as an additional insured. So I don't know how we insure a ton of fiscal sponsors. I'm not sure how you would find one. Maybe you could Google fiscal sponsors. But there's some large ones that you can definitely find that and tap into. And if they align with your mission, that definitely makes sense.
Are there
Oh,
any
great.
other questions? I know I'm a fan of fiscal sponsorship. Not all fiscal sponsors do the pooled insurance availability for all of their members. However, there are definitely are some that do it, so it'd be something to tap into. But do you all have any questions? We have 4 minutes left. I want to make sure that we we get those questions answered. These really have been, Julie, some really great questions, but I think you've also provided something that was really informative and very, as I mentioned before, Julie and I had a conversation before we started the webinar on the timeliness of this conversation, this being a great opportunity for organizations to reset that have not had insurance, but really to understand that this is not just something you add when it's needed in an exact moment, but this is preventative. This is risk management, and this should be something that you make a priority, and it's a non-negotiable for your organization. So I just truly thank you for your time. Thank you for saying yes and helping us to get this done as our last community webinar for the year. I am a fan of the Nonprofits Insurance Alliance. I have been using and or recommending the organization since 2005. And so for organizations that I have led and then for organizations that I've counseled. So this has just been a tremendous asset for us this evening. And for those of you that are on this call, you will also get access to this replay so that you can really just review it and grab some additional nuggets as you process the next steps in your risk management journey. And I will turn it over to you if you have anything else you'd like to offer before we close out.
No, I will follow up. I can send you a slide deck of the PowerPoint. We've got a great FAQ document that it's just a nice 101 document that's, I think, very helpful for nonprofits. And I can also send you a link for that volunteer guide as well. There's information out there. I know you guys are so busy doing what you do. The missions are very important, and sometimes we don't have time to look into the rest of this. So we'll try to make it as easy as possible to get that information to you. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. We appreciate you. And for those of you on the call, thank you for signing up and thank you for committing and staying the journey with us tonight. This is the last of the free community webinars that we're offering. We will be back towards the end of January with another community. All of our community webinars are free and open to the general public. That's outside of our general Cause Studio membership community. And so as long as you are on our list, you will get notification on what's coming up next. But actually, the timeliness, the next one will probably be on fiscal sponsorship because we have been talking I've been talking to 3 different fiscal sponsors about just coming to the table and sharing what a fiscal sponsor is. And so we're hoping that we can get that done in January, but I'm managing a few different calendars because I'd love to have more than 2 fiscal sponsors on that call. So stay tuned for that. The timeliness of the end of the conversation, what might lead our next community webinar is tremendous. But thank you all again for attending tonight. Julie, again, thank you for your time and your brilliance and just sharing this as a critical resource that our community needs. And to everyone, regardless of what you celebrate, enjoy this end of the year season. And I hope that as nonprofit leaders that you are kind to yourselves and where you can get some rest so that you can reset for 2024. So thank you all, and we will see you again in the new year.